The bowl slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a sharp, empty sound that seemed louder than it should have been. It rolled slowly across the wood, turning once before coming to rest near the door, and I stood there for a moment, watching it, not because it mattered, but because I needed time before facing what I already knew. Behind me, Soren shifted slightly, his movement careful and almost silent, as if even the smallest sound might draw attention we could not afford. He did not ask for food, because he had stopped asking 2 days ago, and that silence had settled between us in a way that made everything heavier. At the table, Mira continued eating without looking up. She broke her bread into small pieces, dipped them slowly, and ate with calm patience, as if nothing else in the room required her attention. And it was not anger that made her difficult to face, but the way she could ignore us completely, as if we had already been removed from her life. I bent down, picked up the bowl, and placed it back on the table. My hands moved carefully, not because I was afraid of dropping it again, but because noise felt unnecessary, and speaking would not change anything, as it had not for a long time. There had been a time when the kitchen felt different. It had never been full, but it had been enough, and meals were simple but shared, with someone noticing when we stayed too quiet or ate too little. That kind of attention does not disappear all at once, but fades slowly until one day it is simply gone. After she was gone, the house changed in ways that were difficult to describe, but easy to feel. Jim's father stopped spending time inside and began leaving early and returning late, as if staying away required less effort than staying present. When he did speak, his words were brief and carried no real weight. Mira did not need to raise her voice to take control, and it showed in smaller things that were harder to argue with. The kitchen door stayed locked longer than before. Food appeared and disappeared without explanation, and plates were not filled equally, though no one questioned it. That morning, Soren stood near the wall, his arms folded tightly against himself, his shoulders drawn inward, making him look smaller than he should have, not because he was weak, but because he had learned to take up less space. When he looked at me, I understood what he needed, so I turned toward the door and said quietly, "We're going out," and he followed without hesitation. The air outside felt colder, but it was easier to breathe, and we walked past the edge of the yard and across the dry ground toward the forest without looking back, because there was nothing behind us that would change if we stayed. The forest stood ahead, tall and silent, its trees forming a dark line against the sky. We had seen it many times before, always from a distance and always staying close to the road. But that day we stepped inside, and the first steps felt uncertain, as if we were crossing into something unfamiliar. The ground softened beneath our feet, and the sounds from the open land faded behind us as leaves shifted quietly underfoot. The air felt heavier and slower, as if it carried more than silence, and Soren stayed close beside me, with his shoulder almost touching mine. After some time, he asked if we would find food, his voice quiet but carrying a fragile hope, and I kept my eyes ahead as I told him that we would find something, not because I believed it, but because it was enough to keep us moving. We walked longer than we should have, and the deeper we went, the more the forest seemed to close around us. The light softened as it passed through the branches above, and even the air felt different, as if it resisted movement. Eventually, Soren sat down beneath a large tree, leaning back with the kind of exhaustion that does not disappear with rest, while I remained standing for a moment, looking around as if something might appear, simply because I expected it. Nothing did, so I sat beside him, and for a while we said nothing. Hunger changes more than the body, because it slows everything else with it, making thoughts harder to form, and even small movements feel heavy, while time stretches in a way that makes every moment feel longer than it should. We had reached a point where asking for help no longer felt natural. Then a sound broke through the stillness, soft but close enough to matter, and I turned slowly toward the space between the trees as Soren straightened beside me, his attention following mine. Something moved there with a steady, certain pace, neither quick nor careful, a shape stepped forward. It was a cow. At first there was nothing unusual about her, but something in the way she moved felt different, because she did not hesitate or stop at a distance, but approached calmly, as if she had already decided to come closer before we had even noticed her. Soren's hand caught my sleeve, and then I told him quietly to stay still. The cow stopped a few steps away and looked at us, her eyes calm and steady, without fear, and there was no tension in her body, no sign that she might run or react. For a moment, nothing happened. Then something changed, and food appeared between us. I did not see it form, and I could not explain it, because it was simply there, as if it had always belonged in that place. Soren looked at me, unsure, and I told him to go on, so he moved slowly at first as if expecting it to disappear. But when it did not, his hesitation faded and hunger took over in a quiet, steady way. I followed, still uncertain but unable to ignore what was in front of us. We ate without speaking. When we finished, I looked up again, but the cow had already turned away and was walking back into the forest without a sound, disappearing between the trees until there was nothing left to follow. We stayed where we were for some time after that, neither of us moving, until Soren said we should come back, and I nodded. The next morning we returned, following the same path and stopping at the same place. And for a moment nothing happened before doubt settled quietly in my mind. But then the cow appeared again, just as before, and once again there was food. After that, it became the only thing we depended on. We left early before anyone noticed and returned before the house had fully woken, speaking less about it, not because there was nothing to say, but because saying it would make it real in a way that felt dangerous. As days passed, strength returned slowly, and we walked more steadily, spoke with more energy, and no longer felt controlled by hunger at every moment, but changes like that do not stay hidden. Mira began to watch us. At first it was small, a longer look when we entered a room and a pause before she spoke, and one evening she said we did not seem as tired, and when I replied that we were fine, she studied us for a moment before calling it strange. After that, her attention remained. Ellen noticed even more. Unlike her mother, she did not hide her curiosity, and she watched openly, her eyes following us until her presence became harder to ignore. It did not take long before watching turned into something else. The first time she followed, I heard her behind us, and the second time I saw her reflection in the water, and by the third day I understood she would not stop. We could not turn back without raising questions. And we could not confront her without revealing everything, so we kept walking. That day, the forest felt heavier, the air pressing closer and the light dimmer, while Soren stayed near me, his steps slower and his attention shifting more often. When we reached the place, I stopped, and for a moment nothing happened before the cow appeared, just as she always did, and Soren moved forward with relief clear in his movement, but I remained still, because something felt different. Then a sharp sound came from behind us, and I turned. Ellen stepped out from behind a tree, her face pale and her eyes fixed on what stood before us, and she looked at the cow, then at the food, and finally at us. She said nothing at first, and in that silence everything changed. The forest had given us what the world had refused, but it had never promised to keep it hidden. Her expression shifted slowly from confusion to understanding, and then to something colder. And standing there, I understood what we had lost. Not the food, not the safety, but the secret that had protected both. And once a secret is seen, it no longer belongs to you. Before I share the rest of story, I need to know, where are you listening from? I would love to hear from you. Ellen did not speak immediately. She stood there, her eyes moving slowly between the cow and the food, as if she needed time to accept what she was seeing. And the forest around us felt quieter than before, as though even the air was waiting for her to react. Soren moved closer to me, his hand gripping my sleeve more tightly, and I could feel the tension in him, not sudden but building, like something that had been held back for too long and was now beginning to surface. "You've been coming here," Ellen said at last, her voice steady but no longer uncertain, and it was not a question. I did not answer, because there was nothing I could say that would change what she had already seen. She stepped closer, her attention fixed on the space between us, looking at the food, then at the cow, and finally back at me, as if trying to understand how everything connected. "You knew," she said quietly. "You knew and you said nothing." Soren shifted beside me, ready to respond, but I stopped him before he could speak because this was not a moment that words could fix. "It wasn't yours to take," I said, my voice calm but carrying more weight than I expected. Ellen held my gaze, and something in her expression changed, not into anger, but into something colder, something that measured and decided quickly. "It is now," she said. She turned without waiting for a reply and walked back through the trees, her steps quick and certain, without looking back. For a long moment, neither of us moved. "She's going to tell her," Soren said quietly. I nodded because there was no reason to pretend otherwise. We ate that day, but the food did not feel the same, and each bite felt temporary, as if it no longer belonged to us. When I looked at the cow, she stood as she always had, calm and still, but something about the moment felt different, as if it would not return the same way again. We left earlier than usual. The walk back felt longer, even though we moved at the same pace and every sound behind us seemed sharper, while every movement between the trees felt closer than it should have been. By the time the house came into view, I already knew what we would find. Mira was waiting. She stood near the door, her posture relaxed but her attention fixed, while Ellen stood beside her, quiet now, her earlier curiosity replaced by certainty. Inside, our father sat at the table, his expression uncertain, as if he had been drawn into something he did not fully understand. "You went into the forest again," Mira said, her voice calm but leaving no room for denial. "Yes," I replied. She held my gaze for a moment, then turned slightly toward Ellen. "Tell him." Ellen spoke clearly, without hesitation, describing everything in careful detail, from the forest to the cow to the food that appeared without explanation, and she did not rush or leave anything out. Our father listened in silence. At first his expression showed disbelief, then doubt, and finally something heavier, as if he were trying to decide whether not believing would be easier than accepting it. When she finished, the room fell quiet. Mira stepped forward. "You see," she said softly, "they have been hiding this." Her tone was controlled, almost gentle, but it carried a firmness that was difficult to argue with. "It may not be real," our father said, though his voice lacked conviction. "It is real," she replied. She did not raise her voice because she did not need to. "I need that animal," she continued. "You understand why." There was a pause, and in that pause, the decision was already forming. "For the child," she added. That was enough. Our father looked at us briefly, then away, and he stood slowly. Work as if the movement required more effort than it should have. "I will go," he said. Soren's hand tightened around mine. "No," he whispered. But the word did not change anything. The next morning our father left before sunrise. We did not follow because there was nothing we could do. When he returned, the cow walked beside him. She moved the same way she always had, calm and steady, without resistance, and there was no fear in her movement, no struggle, nothing that made it easier to watch. Mira stepped forward immediately. "That's the one," she said. She moved around the cow slowly, studying her as if confirming something she had already decided. "Do it," she said. Our father hesitated. For a moment it seemed like he might refuse, but then Mira spoke again, her voice sharper this time. "Do it!" He reached for the knife. Once Soren pressed closer to me, his breathing uneven, and I could feel the moment narrowing, closing in on us, leaving no space to step away from it. Our father stepped forward and raised the knife. But nothing happened. The air felt wrong, as if something held the moment in place. And when he tried again, the cow did not react, and the movement did not continue. Mira's calm began to break. "Why are you stopping?" she demanded. "I'm not," he said, but something was resisting him, something that would not allow the moment to move forward. Mira stepped closer, her voice cold. "If this doesn't happen, I will deal with them myself." Her eyes shifted toward us. Soren's grip tightened. I looked at the cow. For the first time, I understood what she had given us. Not just food or relief from hunger, but time. Time to breathe. Time to regain strength. In time to believe that something good could still exist. She had fed us when no one else would, and we stood there saying nothing while she was taken from us. There are moments when holding on becomes the crueler choice. I stepped forward slightly and spoke. The change was immediate. The resistance in the air disappeared, as if something had quietly stepped aside, and our father's hand steadied, as the moment that had been held back finally moved forward. The cow became still. I did not watch for long because I did not need to. That night the house felt emptier than before. Soren sat beside me in silence for a long time before finally saying that we could not stay there, and I nodded because there was nothing left that could protect us. Before the first light of morning, we left again. We moved quickly this time, and not stopping until the house was far behind us, and although the forest closed around us once more, it no longer felt the same, because it no longer held anything for us. After some time, the path divided into two. I stopped. Soren looked at me, already understanding. "We stay together," he said. I wanted that, but wanting it did not make it safe. "If we go the same way, we're easier to find," I said. He looked at me, then away, then back again, and his hand tightened around mine, holding longer than before, as if letting go would make everything final. For a moment, it felt like we might refuse it. Then his grip loosened. He took one path. I took the other. I did not turn back, because I knew that if I did, I might not keep walking. And stopping was something we could no longer afford. The path I chose narrowed quickly, like forcing me to slow down and watch every step I took, while the ground beneath me remained uneven and covered with roots and loose soil. The trees grew closer together the deeper I went, and after a while, the sound of Soren's footsteps disappeared completely, leaving a silence that felt heavier than anything I had known before. I kept moving, because there was no reason to stop and no clear direction to follow, while standing still would not change anything. Time passed without structure, and I stopped counting days, instead noticing smaller things, like the way light shifted through the trees, or the sound of water hidden beneath the ground, or the slow return of strength in my body as I learned to survive without depending on anything else. Hunger returned, but it no longer controlled me the way it once had. Because I learned how to move with it, how to continue even when it stayed close. After some time, the trees began to thin, allowing more light to reach the ground while the silence changed, replaced by distant sounds that did not belong to the forest itself. Then I found a path. It was narrow and shaped by repeated movement, pressed into the ground by people who had walked it many times, and I stood at its edge for a while before stepping forward. It led me to a village. I stayed at the edge at first, watching, learning, understanding. No one noticed me. That gave me time. Eventually, I stepped inside. Life moved steadily there, quietly, without drawing attention to itself. And I found a place where I could remain without being seen too much. Over time, I began to help, not because I was asked, but because it was easier than doing nothing. People noticed the results, even if they did not notice me. Days turned into weeks. The village became familiar. Then I saw her. Kalyra. She noticed me more than once, but never spoke. And that silence felt like a decision rather than chance. At night, everything changed. The village was not safe. Conflict came without warning. The first time I watched. The second time I moved closer. The third time I acted. I stayed unseen, moving carefully, choosing moments instead of reacting to everything, and that was enough to make a difference. The village leader began to ask questions. Eventually, he gathered everyone. "There is someone among us," he said, "someone who has been protecting this place." No one moved. Then Kalyra stepped forward. She walked through the crowd and came to me. "Well, this is the one," she said. The leader studied me. "This?" he asked. "Yes," she said. The silence held. Then he stepped back. "Then you will stay." And that was enough. Life settled after that, not into comfort, but into something steady. I stayed because I chose to, and that choice mattered. One evening, I returned to the edge of the forest. I did not step inside. Some help comes quietly, and sometimes it leaves the same way. I stood there for a while thinking of Soren. I did not know where he was, but I believed he had survived, because we both had. And for the first time, that felt like enough. If this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional stories like this. And tell me in the comments, would you have made the same choice?